Hi, my name is Mark, one of the pastors here at Trillium. As I've mentioned before, we're going around the stained glass stories of the church. The story of Jesus was placed in stained glass back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Some beautiful stained glass here. We're looking at the story now at the very back of the church, the big stained glass. It's called the Last Supper. And of course, it's Jesus' Last Supper alive on earth. It's when the disciples, all 12, plus Jesus, gather at a dinner table. And it's meant to be a celebration of Jesus' life and the moment of transfer when he places the baton for the kingdom of love in their hands. That mission Jesus has been on, that he's been striving for the last few years, is now being transferred over to the disciples. He himself is withdrawing for that last stage of the journey in love. And the disciples are meant essentially to be the new franchise holders. They are meant to be the ones who are now responsible to be God's hands in the world in a very powerful way. But three major events occur during that Last Supper that make one wonder whether the transfer is going to take effect. And they are betrayal, hubris, and denial. Betrayal. Jesus says to the disciples at the table, one of you is going to betray me. And that sets off a kind of a storm in the discussions around the table. And all the disciples are looking at each other, wondering who it is that he's talking about. And in that moment, the franchise is tested because that core group, the essentially board of directors of the franchise of love, are now looking at each other as potential betrayers. And then immediately we get to the next problem, hubris. The disciples begin to converse with themselves and they begin to argue amongst themselves about who's going to be the greatest in heaven, who's the greatest of them all. And it strikes one in that moment that they just don't seem to get what love's about. Love's not about strutting about saying how good you are, how great you are, or how important you are. And Jesus jumps into this conversation and says, you're not to be like the Gentiles who kind of lord it over each other and give each other fancy titles. And so you're to be the exact opposite. Those of you who aspire to be the greatest are to become like the least. You who want to be in charge of things, you need to serve other people. And he says, I've come to not lord it over you, but to be your servant, and you're to be like me. Denial. Right after this moment, Jesus says to Peter, who's essentially the head steward of the new franchise, the chief franchise holder of the kingdom of love, he says to him, Peter, you're going to deny me. Peter freaks out about this. No, Lord, I'm going to walk with you right to the very end. I'll go to jail for you. I'll die for you. And Jesus says, I'm sorry to tell you, Peter, but, before the rooster crows 3 times, you're going to have denied me 3 times. And this sets off another bomb in the midst of this meal. And at the very end of it, one wonders whether there is going to be a franchise going forward in the kingdom of love. The whole thing seems to have fallen apart. And if if Jesus judged the world like we judge it, then we would probably tell Jesus, hey man, it's all over. Why don't you just go to Burger King and get a job and forget about the whole thing. But Jesus doesn't serve life in the way that we do. And he doesn't move in life. He communes with the God, the Creator, who is love, and he serves an indomitable love that cannot be quenched in life. And he moves forward even in this great moment with the full confidence that the love, that indomitable love, that love that cannot die, that love that can never be quenched, will find its fulfillment in his disciples. While he's mentored them for so long and it looks as if this great project will fall apart, that's not the case. There's been many stories of people who have triumphed in the most hardest circumstances. You know what I'm talking about. When people lose their spouse too soon, or they get fired from their job, or there's some great crisis in their marriage, or their health isn't what it's supposed to be, and they're suffering for it, yet they can still manifest love in those places. I read a story of a woman who was in a concentration camp who wrote this most incredible prayer for the people who were her tormentors. And she asked for God's blessing upon them and to recognize not the punishment that had been done to them, but the great blessings they'd received while they were in the concentration camp. And you and I were all in our own prisons of sorts, and we can still manifest love no matter where we find ourselves. Whatever prison or circumstances we are in, however tough it is, there is that manifestation of love in every moment. And I pray that the franchise can get paid forward to you today, that you can become a franchise holder and have a stake in the kingdom of love, just like those first disciples. A miracle took place in the midst of all this craziness. The transfer did take place ultimately, and it's taken place in you.